I actually use ExpressVPN. That's serious. Everyone thinks I'm in Denmark all the time because ExpressVPN, going online without it is like putting your passwords and credit card numbers on a huge billboard for the whole world to see.
That would seem dumb.
Secure your online data today by visiting expressvpn.com/Shane. That's expressvpn.com/Shane to find out how you can get 4 extra months for free. Just by knowing me, 4 months of data protection on ExpressVPN. Bango.
It's not just about the campaign. It's about what does the Democratic Party stand for? Do ordinary people say, yeah, that is a party that is fighting for my interest?
How does the Democratic Party rebuild and not be the party of institutional waste?
An entrenched elitism. Bernie Sanders, whose campaign I managed, was a populist by nature.
We are going to make it very clear that oligarchy is not what this country is about.
What the Democratic Party used to be. It used to be the bread and butter economic justice party of America. People think of the Democratic Party, Shane, at this point, they would say, oh, that's the party that fights for diversity, equity, inclusion, multi-ethnic, this, that, or the other, which is divorced from, that's the party that fights for my minimum wage to go up, my healthcare benefits, my paid sick leave, a more functional, effective government. That's what we used to be for, and we should be for.
All right. Keyhole Chedayar. Pakistan Zindabad. I know that because I love going to Pakistan. Now, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this stuff, but you were the first Muslim and first Pakistani American campaign manager for a major party in the U.S. presidential campaign.
I think so. I think
that's why we started with Pakistan Zindabad. You're the executive director of A More Perfect Union. You famously were Bernie Sanders' national political director for his 2020 presidential campaign.
Campaign man.
And before that, the national political director for American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, and the national political advocacy department of the ACLU. So, did you run, I don't know the process, but did you run for DNC chair recently? Or
I did. Enough about me. Let's talk about you, Shane.
Okay. Well, the reason why I wanted to talk to you today, and I want to say thank you for taking the time, is after Obama won his landslide election where they swept Congress and Senate and executive, I remember I had an interview with Frank Luntz, who was the Republican strategist, because there was some talk at that point of we might never see a Republican president again. Why? Because it seems funny now, but it didn't seem funny at the time, because the thinking went that, the baby boomers have had sort of a lock on political and social, everything because of the demographic that they held. And now that millennials will be the biggest cohort, and because young people generally vote Democratic, that Obama was the sort of signifier of a change that would not swing back to the Republican Party. And Frank Luntz tells this story. I interviewed him about this story, where he sort of got the last sort of remnants of the Republican Party together for a dinner.
It was all about a lost movement trying to figure out how to get back up on his feet.
So it wasn't to sort of go attack the president from day one, and if Obama's for it, we're against it. It was more
Never.
What's the new strategy?
Is there a new, not even what's the new strategy?
Is there a new strategy?
Is there a new strategy, or are we done?
And they came up with a policy of, we're going to go after the counties, we're going to gerrymander things so we, if they're going to have blue cities, we're going to have red counties, which, by the way, if you look at the map now and if you saw the last election map, it's insane. Like every county is red and every city is blue. So their plan worked. And, I was wondering because, you had a very telling election. Now, obviously, the House and the Senate and Supreme Court and executive is all conservative. I was saying, like, what does the Democratic Party do? A. B, it seems that they haven't really done a great job of building their bench. You know what I mean? Like, where are the shining stars of the party, and how do they Frank Luntz it and regroup and come back stronger? And so when I was asking around about who are these luminaries and shining stars and thinkers in the Democratic Party that can rebuild, Faiz Shakir came up, and I want to thank you for spending the time today. So here we go. On that light note,
you were led astray, but I'll try to do my best.
Obviously, this has to be, you have to be thinking about this, and it has to be probably on the tip of the tongue of most smart Democratic cats like yourself. What went wrong, and B, how do you fix it, and C, what's the plan going forward?
Well, the Democratic Party is not a grassroots party anymore. When you think about Obama in that period of time, we had people associated with the Democratic Party,
right.
large numbers of people. Now the Democratic Party has become largely an elite club in which the association with grassroots actors is not something that is valued, preferenced, or even measured. So if you think about across the country, Bernie Sanders, whose campaign I managed, was a populist by nature. Donald Trump's a populist by nature. They care about people who show up to their rallies because those rallies attendance suggests something about the volunteer health of the organization, what you're then going to do with volunteers and enlist them in efforts to help you win campaigns.
Yeah.
That is a vibrant body. Now, if I asked you, let's say you were a member of the Democratic Party, what is asked of you besides a $15, $20, $50 contribution every now and again? Nothing, right? It's not a movement. The MAGA thing is a movement. We are not. And so one is just starting to go back to that, of the nature of being a grassroots orientation. It means you measure in preference. Are people showing up to events with Democratic politicians or not? How are we enlisting them, getting around the country, outside of donor rooms, outside of like high-heeled fundraisers, and trying to associate with working class people in America?
Yeah, that's a good point, that the Democratic Party, which used to be, the sort of grassroots party, and also the famed political machine, was out politically machined and out grassroots by the Republican Party, which, led to this sweep. How did that happen? Go.
How much time do we got to have you? There's a lot of different answers for it, but obviously it's hard to be a party of the working class and a party of the billionaire class. Right. So something's got to give. And as the political system, both on the left and the right, has gravitated more to needing money from super PACs, outside contributors, large dollars, it has less preferenced the need to have large numbers of people associated with your party. You want voters, sure, but not to have healthy organizations that have vibrant bodies attached to them. So it has become less preference. As a result, if you look at the last campaign cycle, you have hundreds of millions of dollars spent on TV ads that are 30 seconds in nature, who are basically one directional approach to force down the throats of a lot of people a message. But very little on the other side of vibrancy coming up from grassroots people to tell us what we are. To your point of what the Democratic Party used to be, it used to be the bread and butter economic justice party of America, the laborers party, the blue collar working class party of America. You were referencing earlier the Obama coalition. And I think it was around that time, I believe, the Democratic Party started to break and become something assigned with demographics as destiny, the identity nature. You were kind of going through some of the identity nature of the people associated with the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
I'm like, yes, that's nice to have people of different demographics associated with your party. What would be better is to have it defined around what you believe in. And that used to be an economic justice focus of fighting for middle class, working class people in America. That has become dissipated over time to be more identitarian, right? So if people think of the Democratic Party, Shane, at this point, they would say, oh, that's the party that fights for diversity, equity, inclusion, multi-ethnic, this, that, or the other,
100%.
which is divorced from, that's the party that fights for my minimum wage to go up, my healthcare benefits, my paid sick leave, fighting for making the rich pay their fair share of a more functional, effective government. That's what we used to be for, and we should be.
Yeah, that's a great point. So it went from a sort of economic focus for a larger group of people, middle class, working class, etc., the majority of the people, let's say, to identity politics and a theoretical more than a let's move the economy this way. Like, that seems to be a large ideological shift.
Yes.
Was that a conscious thing? How did that happen? Is that the result of the right moving more to the right and the left moving more to the left? What happened?
Well, let me start with left of center politics here. What happens around us in society during this period of time, Shane?
Right.
Let's take the last 3 decades. The growing wealth and income inequality just becomes huge. The word billionaire probably in Obama's first term was rare, right?
Yeah.
It was not a term commonly used. Now, billionaires, sure, there's 1,000 of them, and there's going to be much more. There might be a trillionaire. So the wealth and income inequality has grown to such a great point that is what's going on around us. So then you have wealth funding campaigns, and then candidates having to choose. Are you an economic justice crusader?
Yeah.
Are you focused on wealth and income inequality? Or as a result of wealthy people giving you money, are you finding a distracted other way to campaign? And that is where the majoritarian sentiment of the elites of the Democratic Party has moved. Okay, instead of identifying as an economic justice warrior in a time of massive wealth and income inequality, I'm going to take the escape hatch. The escape hatch is, I think we should have, preferential hiring, transgender policies, choice issue fights, places in which we feel like the diversity of our communities is well represented, but not, in some sense, become a kind of departure from the economic justice issues that would have alienated, in my view, some of those high-end billionaire donors whom we have come to rely on more to fund the party.
ExpressVPN. Going online without it is like putting your passwords and credit card numbers on a huge billboard for the whole world to see.
That would seem dumb.
Every time you connect to an unencrypted network in cafes, hotels, airports, etc., your online data is not, and I repeat, not secure. Any hacker on the same network can gain access and steal your personal data. Passwords, bank logins, credit card information.
All the stuff.
Hats.
Shoes.
I just said hats because you have a hat on. It doesn't take much technical knowledge to hack somebody. Just some cheap hardware is needed, and a smart 12-year-old can do it. It would take a hacker with a supercomputer over 1 billion years.
It's a long time.
It's like the whole monkeys with the thing Shakespeare. Longer. 1 billion years to get past the ExpressVPN patent-pending encryption. Incredibly easy to use. Fire up the app, click one button, and get protected. I do it all the time. Secure your online data today by visiting expressvpn.com/Shane. That's expressvpn.com/Shane to find out how you can get 4 extra months for free. expressvpn.com/Shane. Bazango. And so you were part of the team that was an incredible political success story, i.e. Bernie. Great grassroots and social media. It seems like the Democrats lost the social media war against the Republicans in this last election. Where was Bernie to save us? What happened?
Well, we used to win it, right? You remember.
Yeah.
I mean, in his first 2016 run and then also 2020, like if you looked at 2020, we had more small dollar donors in social justice activity or social media activity than all the other candidates combined, right?
Yeah.
In the 2020 primary. We had more grassroots-ism within Bernie. And of course, simultaneously, you remember we were castigated by some in the Democratic Party as these are Bernie bros.
Yeah.
These people with some anger and hatred and venomous, comments
Right.
out there from people who like Bernie. And my point of view on that has long been and still is that this is democracy. Democracy is messy. These are not people who are like couth and like have worked in politics for 4 decades, know how to interact. They're driven by passion and justice. And so they say things maybe that, polite people with JDs and MBAs wouldn't say. And unfortunately, too many in the Democratic Party castigated them, called them Bernie bros, said,
Right.
You're being mean. Joe Rogan was probably famously one of them.
Yeah.
He was a Bernie bro.
I think he was a Bernie voter.
Yes, he's indicated. In fact, I remember getting criticized for this. We posted a video of him saying he would vote for Bernie Sanders. And so when we posted it, The Human Rights Campaign at the time issued a condemnatory statement that we were, transgressing against our communities that needed, our support and championship. Also, not only the Human Rights Campaign, Move On issued a statement condemning us for having accepted the endorsement. I'm like, well, politics is the art of persuasion. You need people to join you. You don't want to be pushing people away. That's not good politics.
Yeah.
And yeah, we were kind of derided, sadly, wrongly, because I think people just didn't want Bernie to be their nominee.
Well, also, I mean, Joe has more viewers than MSNBC, CBC, like the CNN, ABC, all put together. B, one of the reasons why Trump won the election is he went on Rogan and Harris did it.
But more fundamentally, Shane, like, talk to people with whom you may have disagreement.
Yeah.
Like the whole point is like, okay, fine, he might have a viewpoint that you don't like. Guess what? Like, welcome to the world. Like, everyone's got a viewpoint that maybe you don't like. The question is, do you want to engage them and bring them into your universe? That's what I still get upset about. So many Democrats are like, it's a purity test. The whole point is to persuade them, engage them, talk to them, and help them understand why you feel a certain way, why they should maybe think about a different way. It's a different form of persuasion, right?
Yes. We've become sort of polarized, between the Republicans and the Democrats. And, speaking of Obama, I remember I did a documentary in the last 6 months of his presidency, and I was talking to Speaker Boehner, and, Speaker Boehner got ousted from his position by the Tea Party for even going to meet Obama, which is his job. And you're like, okay, we can't, and, the whole Republicans won't give one vote to the Democrats won't work with the Republicans. It's become crazy, and I want to get into that a little bit more, but let's get into media.
Yeah, I'm reminded of that shit with Obama. One of the first agitators was Donald Trump, who said that, essentially he doesn't have a birth certificate. You can remember well. It was a sense of like, he's not one of us. He's not American. We can't even have him as our president.
I was telling somebody I wanted to do a podcast series of, let's go back and basically all of the things that they said Obama was going to do, take the guns and he's a communist and there's, he's going to make it socialist and all this stuff. And then like even in the Trump stuff, it's like, gay people are going to go to concentration camps and this is going to happen. I mean, it's incredible what goes out in rhetoric on the campaign trail. I'm sure there was lots about Bernie, we're all going to be commies and all this stuff.
Oh. But the thing that Shane, correct? I mean, you tell me if you feel differently. Is that one of the things we've always had kind of wingnut kind of conspiracies as long as America's did, right?
Yeah.
What has changed is the technological platforms on which we receive information preferencing the wingnut conspiracy theory, so they get more traction because they're more engaged with, they're more interesting for those kinds of platforms. They're more elicitous of emotions, and therefore get way more exposure than they actually deserve, or are represented in the American public.
Yeah. The actual theory behind this show is I saw social media become incredibly politically powerful and, in fact, influence policy. If you look at the last presidential debate, I mean, everything was coming from X or Twitter or YouTube or whatever. And, whoever can navigate those waters better wins, and the Democrats didn't. Now, speaking of navigating those waters, a more perfect union. You put your money where your mouth is, and you're saying, look, I'm going to start making a media, that's more sane and well informed. You've been doing about 3 years. You have about 1.5 million YouTube subscribers. By comparison, the DNC has 78,000. So you're doing something right. What do you think the Democratic Party and/or the left needs to do with media, and what are you doing with your media platform?
Yeah, I mean, I'm talking to someone who's also trafficking the quite well over many years. So I welcome this being a conversation which you have, some ideas here. But I'm like, I think I found that you tend to get rewarded for interesting and compelling on the ground reporting about the economic inequality that we live in. And to my mind, it's sad on the center left. We were talking about this earlier, that while economic and wealth inequality is maybe one of the biggest issues of our time, it is not. There isn't like a major national organization. There isn't like an ACLU or Sierra Club or Human Rights Campaign of economic justice issues. We've long relied on labor, which reflects the union movement in America.
Yeah.
But to my mind, what people are hungry for is they know there is corporate greed, exploitation, taking advantage of them in every which way, whether you're a small business owner, whether you're a consumer, whether you're a worker. And all we're trying to do is unpack that in a fair, honest, and sincere way from the perspective of a working class person. We hear so much of our news from like the perspective of a CNBC or a business class. Will this hurt the stock price or will it not hurt the stock price?
Right.
Sure, that's one perspective of a wealthy person who's, invested in the stock. But if Starbucks has workers who are organizing, you can certainly look at that from the vantage point of an investor. I would like to look at it from the perspective of the worker. What is it that you are fighting for? What in a world that has such massive power gap between those who have all of it and basically tens and tens of millions of people have none of it, so their voices need to be heard in this democracy, and their perspective and issues need to be heard. And that's all I'm trying to do. It turns out, when you do that kinds of content, people gravitate to it.
Which they do. I've seen some of it, which is great, and I highly recommend people go check it out. More Perfect Union. To go back to your economic disparity and being a party or a philosophy that deals with economics, which I agree with 100%. What do you make of the political divide? I mean, I was saying this to someone the other day. Like, I don't understand how going in and seeing where tax dollars are spent. Like, we just had fires out here. I pay some of the most tax in America, and there was no fire trucks when our houses started burning down, and so there's dissatisfaction. But also, like, when you start to go in and say, okay, let's look at what the government's spending. Let's audit the government. Let's see where the sort of and is there going to be gross waste? Of course there is. I mean, these
Yes.
It's just trillions of dollars that are spent by a bureaucracy that's been in there forever. Like, how can you protest against that or say, yeah, we shouldn't be doing that, or we shouldn't be auditing, these, or even the Pentagon, which is probably the worst case, $78,000
Totally.
hammers, et cetera. Like, they're like,
Yes.
yeah, we can't do an audit. What?
This is where a failure of the Democratic Party has been as a governing party, right? Like, when you're governing, we're supposed to be the party of government who believes in government. And when you believe in government, you want to hold it accountable, reform it to make it work. And for too long, we have suggested that, well, the status quo of it just proceeding at its pace of just growth and whatever people are doing is totally fine, instead of challenging it to say, in a world where, it's become more corrupted by lobbying influence, the revolving door, so much bureaucratic hoops and procedures in order to get anything done, that we should have been, and I urge us to still be, the place that is the reform party that wants government to work. Because if we don't do that, guess what the alternative vision is? Here comes Elon Musk. Yeah, I'm going to just wreck it. I'm going to set it on fire. All 2 million federal workers are going to be my targets. And that, of course, is not a solution orientation. That's I see this as a problem, and therefore I'm just going to blow it up, because the cynicism towards government has grown to such great lengths that people are not even sure. A lot of working class people are not sure, can it ever work?
Yeah.
And of course it can. I mean, we remember Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. These have been built by Democrats. And these are successful programs to this day. To your point of efficiency, they're actually even really efficient. If you think about retirement security, Social Security is one of the most efficient ways that we address tens of millions of people's security and retirement security in America. The goal for us is to improve upon it, make it more effective and functional. But yeah, we have too far and too long kind of become a party of just of not challenging government when it's not working well. To your point of the Pentagon, why isn't it us that we're auditing the Pentagon to find reduction
100%.
in pay,
Yeah, well, why? I mean, that's the whole thing is like, there's this sort of political up in arms. You're like, we should be reviewing the Pentagon continually. Like, every time, I remember I was going to Afghanistan and, there was a power plant that didn't work, that was never activated. And then the Taliban were collecting the electricity fees from people. It was just a complete disaster. And, trillions of dollars were wasted, et cetera. And they were like, Shane, where are you getting your scoops? Oh, my God, this is so great. And I'm like, yeah, Sigger, the Special Investigator General, who's appointed by the government. I'm getting it from the government. And so if you look at, you were speaking about revolving door. I mean, you have a lot you have career bureaucrats going to, Raytheon and Boeing and then, getting the contracts and coming. But these are, hundreds of billions of dollars, going through a year.
And they're being overcharged for a lot of those things, like a Stinger missile or whatever. They just raise the price and there's nothing, the government is going to do nothing. We're just going to pay whatever the hell they tell us to pay.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And whenever they do the audits, you'll find a thing like a $78,000 hammer. And you're like, okay, we chuckle, but it's tragedy because, we're paying that money. And to go to your point, the government's gotten so far away that people say, well, I mean, it's great. Is it ever going to work? And you're exactly right that the Democratic Party used to be the party of governance. And you're like, okay, well, why didn't you do that? Why didn't, Biden was a political mechanic,
Yes.
And a consensus politician in his day.
Right.
And he knew how the system worked. He was an insider. And quite frankly, it failed miserably to do any of those things during his presidency.
Yeah, no, I think that in my mind, there's I don't know what do we call this. There's a DNA that's missing of the center left. And Bernie captures, what I think we're wanting, which is he's called for, auditing the Pentagon. He's been on this for decades, a large part of his life. But it's not even just a policy posture that we're talking about. Bernie has a certain quality of just the gumption of wanting to challenge people and wield your authority. Say, accountability matters. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to change up the way we do things.
Yeah.
That has been missing on the center left. You don't see, you take any institution, any large institutions to the left, there's a status quoism, an unwillingness to confront changing them, reforming them. While on the right, Donald Trump has captured the style and the ethos. He'll go in and say, I'm going to fire the head of the RNC and their new person's coming in. I'm just going to change it up. His willingness to just say firing people, holding people accountable, or cutting the budget, or cutting a program or a grant that's been given to somebody, it has been almost become exclusively the domain of the center right. That is the only people who do that. And it's just sad. I don't know what has been lost of the center left, that just be a good manager, care. Like when you're governing, care about outcomes, give a damn, and roll up your sleeves and figure out what are you spending money on. And I do tend to think if we did those things, people want to be with the Democrat.
Yeah.
They know that, hey, your DNA, your background, what you're fighting for is the right approach. But when you don't do your job, I'm penalizing you. I'm going with the other guy who seems like he's going to work 18 hours a day. And my hat's off to Elon Musk and Trump on this regard, is they take those jobs seriously. They're working probably 18 to 20 hours a day. I disagree with a lot of the things they're doing. But then I want some version of that on the left. Who wakes up every day fighting like Dickens to figure out the things that are functional and non-functional in our government and want to be in charge of them and run them with efficiency and purpose.
Exactly. And so, which brings me back to the original point of, okay, how does the Democratic Party rebuild? And you brought it up too, how do they become a grassroots party again? How do they rebuild and not be the party of institutional waste? And then also...
Entrenched elitism. Entrenched elitism is what it is.
And then also, where are the stars? I mean, politics, as you well know, a lot of it is name recognition. And if you look at the Democratic Party now, you got AOC, you got Bernie, and a few others, Bernie on periphery. Who else is there? I mean, how do you build your bench in such a way that, young people and the silent majority and regular people and, working class and middle class Americans resonate with the party again?
I wish I had a better answer for you, Shane. I've been Bernie's chief political advisor now for years and years. This last cycle, 2024, was the first time, Shane, that no major elected official of the left who was in a contested race sought his endorsement.
Wow.
It used to be, if you go back to after his 2016 presidential run, people like Gretchen Whitmer, governor of Michigan, and others, I could give you countless who sought his endorsement, won. And then it's gotten to a place where why are they running late? Because he represents the thing that sadly has become iconoclastic within the party. It's here's this person who believes in grassrootsism, 100% small dollar donor base, cares about taking on the oligarchy, taking on wealth and income inequality. And what do you guys believe? Well, it's something different.
Right.
And yet there's nothing that is built around grassrootsism here. So I can't even point you to here. AOC is a good example. I think she's in that world, but I don't know where's the Democratic establishment world. I except being defined by large dollar interests and donors, I don't know where is the next leaders who feel like I am associated with people, want to be a leader of people and take that leadership and kind of break heads and make government work again.
Yeah. Who do you think would...
There's some governors possibly. I mean, I'm not going to discount.
Who are some superstars that could rise up?
That's a superstars and
stars, potential superstars.
Let's just start with the fact there's some people who hold public office right now, like the governor of Pennsylvania is Josh Shapiro, the governor of Maryland is Wes Moore, the governor of California is Gavin Newsom, the governor of Michigan is Gretchen Whitmer. Are there young governors who could potentially be potential candidates? Sure.
Yeah.
Now, I think that there's also a moment, Shane, where maybe the next leaders are going to come from outside of politics too. I mean, one of Donald Trump's strengths was that he was a businessman who ran. And so I'm like looking at labor leaders, whether you're Sean Fain, who runs the United Auto Workers, or Sean O'Brien, who runs the Teamsters, or, faith leaders, or just businessmen businesswomen who want to join and say, I want to be outside the traditional system and I want to challenge it. I think there's an opening, to be honest.
That makes sense. Do you think that the mismanagement of the California wildfires screws up Newsom's chance going forward?
You're closer to that. I suspect it's been the reality is what hurts there. People are really still struggling to get insurance claims filled, to have
it's a disaster.
Fair and good rebuilding process. Then there should be accountability, right? Like you put elected people in office to do things to improve people's lives.
Yeah. And
if you find that people's lives get difficult, worse, there should be accountability. In some ways, that's where you think the Biden and Harris record starts to hurt, is that if tens of millions of people on the bottom, 50, 60% of America find that their lives were worse off, than 4 years ago, then there should be some accountability. In my view, we're not even reconciling how to do politics right, to go and tell people, here's what I am doing. So most of the time they're getting information, and when there are failures, they'll get the information from Fox News or conservative actors. And I'm like, I'm not even sure what the compelling case is for a lot of these people who want to make the argument. I'm actually governing quite well. I'm like, wait, well, get out there and tell me. I honestly don't know. I've seen it.
Yeah, I was talking to one of my producers of this show, and I said, look, right now in America, the narrative is kind of more powerful than the actual facts. And if you give somebody, an opening, they'll drive a train through it. And the reason why I bring up California is that opening, you could drive, a 747 through it because of exactly what you said, which is everybody goes on the TV and says, oh, we're here to help. We're here to help. And everybody I know is like, well, I can't get the insurance paid. I can't do FEMA's done nothing. It doesn't matter if people are helping or not. It seems the perception is that they're not, and there's a gross ineptitude. And there's the reason why I say does it hurt his chance, because if I was his political opposition, I would just point to it and say, okay, A, why did it happen? And there's all kinds of failures. And then B, what did you do to fix it? And I guarantee you in 2 years, it's still going to be an issue. The world's moved on. Nobody cares anymore except for us, and we're living in a war zone. Anyway, I could go on about that forever. I just wonder if his political future has been hurt.
Well, and also the lesson that I would try to derive of this, right? Like we're all going to hit calamities as if you're elected office, right? You're a member of Congress, you're governor, you're whatever you might be, and calamities are going to happen.
Yeah.
And my impression, Shane, you tell me if you feel differently, is in those moments, we know that people don't have magic wands. You can't fix everything.
Right.
But you are going to show with integrity and conviction that this matters like hell to you, that my life, my condition matters to you. You're going to devote your time, energy, and effort to figuring out ways in which to improve a situation, which may be very difficult to improve. But if the insurers are screwing people over, let's say reimbursements or filing claims, you're going to own it. And that's the job of a public servant. It's one of the few bastions of American life that isn't susceptible to profiteering, right? Of corporate greed. It should be for people. That's what it has been established to do. And when it lets you down, that it is going to be that bulwark for you against, efforts to, save a dollar or like take away your money or take away your livelihood.
Yeah.
It is the government that we count on, and that's why we get so angry, rightly so. If you want to have public servant life, you want to own the nice title and official and all the things that come with it, well, damn it, there's a job to do.
Yeah.
And I want you to feel like every day you wake up hungry to figure out what it is to do something to improve somebody's life.
Yes. What's Bernie doing these days? Why isn't he fixing all this?
Well, I we're trying. So I was just out with him in Omaha, Nebraska this last weekend. In Iowa City, Iowa. We had over 4,000 people show up at these events. The reason we went to these two particular districts, Shane, is that they are held by Republican members of Congress. What is Don Bacon, another by the name of Marionette Miller Meeks. These people won their districts by slight margins.
Right.
And the choice now confronting them is, do you want to be for Medicaid cuts and tax cuts for the rich, which is the bill that is before the House? And Bernie Sanders was trying to mobilize opposition in their respective districts to say to them, don't go with this agenda, fight back against it, and try to elevate the issue on the ground locally in those places. And this weekend, we're going to head to Wisconsin and Michigan, similarly in key Republican-held districts, to raise that issue there. So in his view, if we could, the House margin right now, by the way, the Republicans control it by 3 votes.
Wow.
Shane. So you're talking about very thin margins that they have to, in order to get a House budget that likes through the House, which in my view would be very bad.
Right.
Huge tax cuts for the rich, big cuts to Medicaid, unnecessary and completely hatchet to basic government essential services. So there's a chance, is what I'm telling you, that you could defeat it. Bernie is trying to do his part to rally an opposition to it.
Yeah, usually traditionally, like if there's a sweep, as it happened to Obama, sort of the midterms for Congress come up 2 years later, so that, you can sort of, there's the history anyways of retaking the House.
And you remember this, I think there's a chance. I mean, I'm not going to tell you 100%. That Tea Party revolt of 2010 that you and I remember, that came kind of organically, and a lot of conservatives voting against what they saw as a government overreach by Obama at that time. Now, I think the government decimation by Musk is possibly going to engineer, motivate a different kind of.
Well, it's interesting because now there's the golden glow of success and all this stuff happening, winning the election. And, I say to everybody, just wait 4 years. I mean, everyone's going to be throwing spears. And it's funny because the people who've been throwing spears for the last 4 years now get the spears thrown at them, which is the problem with the two-party system.
Yes.
Bernie should start his own party. Now, to go back to what we were talking about, you do a lot of media, around America today. I have in the past. There's a lot now with the birth of social media and the sort of having, in some cases, of mainstream media, especially on the left. So, it's when I say having, I think I saw some stat, God knows what's true, and this is part of the point of my question, is the having of CNN's audience and now MSNBC and, their audiences, and Joy Reid has just been fired, and there's a big hullabaloo about that. What do you think the rise of social media politically is, and also to the detriment of mainstream media, and how important of a role is misinformation playing in that rise?
Well, in some sense, the democratization of the media has been occurring, where you've got the splintering you used to have, right? CBS, NBC, ABC, Fox, major pillars of how people get their information. Now you have, here's a podcast by Shane Smith, here's More Perfect Union, here's, all kinds of other ways in which to get information.
Right.
That, in my mind, is healthy, and that we should have more people kind of learning.
Here.
Right. And then the challenge now, as you and I operate in the space, is like, well, to what degree is it actually democracy? The algorithms themselves kind of can preference one outcome over another.
Sure.
So then you have the leadership of certain, billionaires with certain ideologies who run the major platforms.
Have you run into any algorithmic trouble?
Oh, yes, we have. I don't know if you have too, but
100%.
When we name and shame a particular corporation,
Black Rock.
I find suppression occurs, and like, oh, the Amazon workers are organizing. Well, somehow that video is like less preference because for some
It's very
reasons, but
interesting.
yeah,
We get it as
yeah.
well, and you'll have some pieces get through and other pieces don't get through. They're like, people, why do some of your things have 7 million viewers and some only have 2 million? You're like, well, that's an interesting question.
Yeah, and in fact, if you then move it to the next realm when we try to somehow put a little bit of money into boosting certain content, you'll find that, oh man, no, that was deemed to be too hot or too like salacious or called misinformation. And you're like, what? Because it named the corporation?
So funny because we
here?
get the same thing, and we're using tools that they actually give us on these social platforms that they sell to you, and then you use them. They're like, you know what? No, this is a bit too. And you're like, what's salacious about it, or what? Like, there's nothing really that isn't out there everywhere. Anyway, that's another.
Well, I was going to say on this point, we're kind of like trying to be small businesses on these enterprises. You, myself, and the thing is, a lot of the algorithms will set the conditions upon which we can participate on their platform. So we could, in some sense, maybe even not have our own advertising teams because it's like, sorry, you have to use the tools that they provide, which means that you're limited, right? Your structure is limited by them.
It's 100% true. And also, I would just go further that advertisers are also the modern day censors, because if anything comes up that they don't like, then they don't sit next to you, then they're the censor. They're telling people what to watch or what not to watch, and not just in new media, like old media too. I mean, everybody, who they don't like. You know what? We're going to pause our advertising for a little bit and see, and not just on the Democratic side, on the Republican. I mean, even Tucker Carlson got, and you sit there and you go, okay, look, I mean, how advertisers became censors of the news, I do not know. In fact, I do know, but it's not cool.
And I would say they killed the news, right? Like, in some sense, that's what lost the integrity of many of these networks, where you and I know there's some good anchors out there who operate with the subconscious bias, not the conscious bias. They're all good people trying to do the news, but then the subconscious tells you, if I say something, Shane, about Mark Zuckerberg right now, or Big Pharma, I mentioned the company by name, I could get canned. So therefore, you almost know what your guards are, and as a result, you can't speak to the needs and the issues that tens of millions of people out there want to hear from you, but you're kind of constrained, right? You're sitting here saying, I can't talk.
100%. Yeah, I'm sort of a centrist, and I love the game, and I like talking to both sides. And it's funny, when I started this, the left got mad at me for talking to the right gets mad at me for talking to the left, and you're like, what happened to that sort of great Nixonian silent majority, and whatever happened to sort of sanity and talking to both sides? I find it hilarious, and also it's great to talk to you about the ins and outs, because you sort of feel like, hey, is anybody else having to deal with this stuff? It's a minefield to just try to get out there and have non-political, non-polemic, non-paradigmic, none of the P's, news and or politics, because it's so politicized that people get mad. A, and B, the platforms themselves act as censoring institutions.
And I hate the tensions that we often have of like, well, in the thumbnail or the title, do we have to put some crazy word like, bombshell or like conspiracy or something? And you're like, this, I don't, I've tried to hold to that. Like, I'm going to try to report it accurately and fairly without trying to preference. But you and I know there's so many who have to try to traffic whatever platform you're on to like the adjectives and the kind of salaciousness, because the platforms are telling you that. We're not if you want views, we got to be salacious and crazy and polemical about it. You're like, no.
I'm sure you test thumbnails as we do.
Yeah.
And guess which ones work.
Totally.
Yeah.
Exactly. The more kind of hyped it is.
Yeah.
The more the algorithm.
Look, we are guilty of that to some degree, because we do market research, and it happens. Although we do try to talk to all sides, and that's why it's great to talk to you. I will say, the Dems right now, it's harder to find people who you can sort of go out there and say, hey, what's happening? What's going on?
Have it be interesting to any degree, right?
Yeah.
Or it's just going to be
Well, it's a very nuanced problem, Shane. And there's a lot. It's very complicated.
Let me gaslight you. There's no real problems here. It's just misinformation and disinformation that we're fighting.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. Trump famously, that's fake news, and he started the whole fake news thing, which you got to give it to him, the gaslighting. And now the Democrats have taken that up, and everything is fake news. What do you make of, speaking of fake news, what do you make of the sort of moderate collapse of sort of traditional mainstream media?
So in my mind, this word moderate, it's an interesting one because I think it exists aggressively in the sense that there's a lot of people out there in the world who are, by their nature, called moderate. And especially when you think about the party system or the issues, specifically the economic issues that you and I are talking about. You go to any town hall in America, and often I test this with people who want to run for office because lots of people want to come to me and say, oh, I want to run. What's your advice? I'm like, okay, I'm going to blindfold you. If we drop you into a town, 100 people, and I didn't even tell you where you're at, you're going to go in there. What are you going to talk about? And I bet you my answer to that is more perfect. You're right. We're going to talk about economic justice issues.
Sure.
And I promise you, I'm going to get 70, 80% of these people nodding their heads yes. Right? That's where, you can put whatever labels you want on it, but there are all those people there who are hungry for that kind of politics, but they know that money is playing a huge deal in influencing so much of what is going on around us. And the question for a lot of people is, do you let that affect your integrity, honesty, convictions, orientation, what shots you're calling? And that's why some of the democratization of these platforms is good, because it tends to be that these are some of the platforms and places where you're more likely to hear honesty of its own kind.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like honesty of its own. I believe that you believe the things that are coming out of your
right.
mouth. Right. Like I know you haven't pre-couched or pre-set. So I'm actually more hopeful that the democratization media is a good thing that will help us move to this place.
Right.
The thing that is going back to is the algorithm. Remember the algorithms. You and I came up in a world. Correct me if I'm wrong. You remember it when we first were on, let's say, Facebook or Twitter when it first launched. Remember, everything was in timeline form.
Yeah.
Right. It was timeline. Like you post it, you go in there and say, okay, here's my last one. Now that you cannot get that kind of, they won't even let you access it in timeline form anymore, because what did they replace it with? Algorithm.
Yeah.
The algorithm becomes a form of both controlling what you see and to sell you stuff.
Yeah.
Now that's their poor secret formula, to your point, of the advertisers. You can't sell to the advertiser if I can't sell you an algorithm.
100%.
And we don't know jack about these algorithms.
Yeah.
This is critical. This is controlling our democracy. And you and I cannot talk to a single person in public life who can tell us, how does an algorithm on YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, or X currently tell me?
It's a black box.
And think about how important that is. This is the thing about how we learn, and yet no one can tell me how it works.
Yeah.
Crazy, right?
No, I agree. It's crazy, and I think a lot of things about this modern age are crazy and quite frankly dizzying and difficult to navigate. And you and I are in this milieu. We're in the world of politics and technology and new media and all this stuff. And we're sitting there on a podcast going, hey, are you having problems with the out? Yeah, hey, what do you think about this? And so, obviously, these are conversations that are very confusing, for a lot of people out there.
By design is my point. By design. This is at least my perspective. Right. Imposed upon us by people with great wealth and power who say, I like the way this system would work for my ends. And like, yeah, I got it. It does work for your ends.
Yeah, owning the platforms is a very powerful thing. It's like Hearst, back in the day. They owned the sort of distribution of information.
Right.
Speaking of that, Kennedy, RFK Jr., is named Kennedy from the Kennedy family, i.e. the Democratic, heroes. Elon, used to be famously a Democrat. These people sort of said, hey, we're going to go with this conspiracy of the weird, and we're going to, not conspiracy, coalition of the weird, and go to Washington and, Elon's ripping the tubes out, and RFK is going to go after big pharma, et cetera. Did Bernie ever get approached, or did he ever think of, look, I could go in there and overhaul, or protect or whatever, Medicaid, Medicare, workers? It seems like it's kind of, Trump is weirdly a bit like Reagan in that he's putting together a cabinet that actually has the power to do stuff. And would Bernie be part of that cabinet?
Well, I think that the hard part for anyone who wants to join the Trump administration is that you have to agree with one particular thing
have to bend the knee.
Bernie went to, which Bernie would never agree to, right? So, I think he's very comfortable saying, hey, if you RFK want to take on the corruption within the Food and Drug Administration, count me in as an ally.
No, which is
Let's
huge.
do that together. But if you want to spend time telling people that Donald Trump won the last election and somehow he's getting this rigged something, don't count me in as an ally. And the same is true of Musk. If you don't want to just bring your blowtorch or your chainsaw to the entire government, but you want to actually go after Pentagon waste, fraud, and abuse or whatever, count me as an ally. Right. So he's trying to indicate that in private conversation, public conversation with them. I'm not here to just fully oppose anything and everything that you do, but I am seeking rationality from where you say you're doing something that works for American public versus things that either work, for the ideology and preference of a single individual, Donald Trump, or it's a preference or ideology of an elite class of donors or rich people who want certain outcomes. In my view, killing off the entire Consumer Financial Protection Bureau.
Right.
What do you do? The entire bureau? Musk himself conceded.
Right.
Oh, it does some good things, but it's got to go. It does some good things and it's got to go. What do you mean? You save it. You figure out how to maintain the things that are doing good things, right? What is this blowtorch to turn the whole damn thing off? No, that is a preference of a certain class of people who would love the whole thing to be turned off.
Yeah. In that light, since we've got all the sort of nuts and bolts out of the way, let's go to the macro. Where do you see politics going in the next 4 years, and where do you see media going in the next 4 years?
Politics in the next 4 years. I see it becoming more darkest before the dawn, ideally.
Right.
But I think there's a hunt for honesty and integrity that is possible here. And it really takes an individual, right? And this is where I get really hopeful is, in some sense, Obama was an individual who came and changed the country at a period of time. And I think there's a possibility of just an individual with the honesty and integrity of wanting to do it a different way who could rise, out of this. But also you'd have to reject the influences and motivations of some of the others.
Maybe that person could be named Faiz.
Is not no. I'd be happy to help somebody. Count me in. I'm here. I served in public life. I want America's democracy to work. That's why I'm driven by injustice. I want to be involved and fix them. But I'm not. I don't think anyone's room for me for anything.
And media.
Cool. People are hungry for facts and research in ways that they haven't had for a long period of time. And as you're getting the decimation of people being laid off of other major news outlets, you could imagine in a world where we get more enterprising, factual sleuthing from really wonderful people, the opportunities to do a Substack or your own kind of TikTok. The barriers are so low. I think the hard part there is how we all going to uncover it. How does that work as a collective endeavor? But I am hopeful that actually with one person being a really good, enterprising, sleuther could uncover massive Pentagon corruption. Now, the problem, as you and I know, is at the end of the day, you also want structures, right? You can't rely completely entirely on superstars who just do one thing. You need structures to work, especially in the media. You need some structures.
You've said, and I'm looking here, and I've got so many questions for you, and so many questions, so little time. That should be the name of my podcast. You said that nowadays you have to be part entertainer, part politician.
Right.
Basically, I love this as the final question because it straddles what we've been talking about. We've been talking about politics, and we've been talking about media. And I just wanted you to unpack that a little bit on a final, last eloquent quote from you. An entertainer and a politician, which Obama was, and by the way, Trump is.
Trump is, for sure.
Yeah, so just unpack that a little bit, and who do you think takes that role going forward?
Yeah, I mean, we think about one of the biggest challenges for Joe Biden is that he wasn't very compelling and entertaining. And at this day and age, with our national leadership, people want to be told what is going on. You need to be your best narrator and to advertise what frictions are you engaged in. Like, you don't assume that the media is going to be, or ads are going to do the trick. You have to be your own narrator of your own journey, your own story. What fights am I taking on? Who am I taking on? How best am I taking them on? And make it come alive for people. Show them your convictions. Show your emotions. That is the new day and age of a politician. You cannot just sitting in an Oval Office, let other kind of comms experts, draft your releases, go out and deliver a speech. No.
Yeah.
A daily basis, you are your own media machine. And I think Donald Trump understands that quite well. It's like every day I am going to tell people directly, and then it's up to others to decide how they like it or not. That's what I'm urging is anyone who wants to enter the particularly national political arena. You want to speak to everybody, be someone who is engaged and engageable with the content.
Yeah, I think Obama did that well. Trump does it well, and Bernie does it well. So good job. Listen, let's keep the dialogue open. It's going to be a crazy 4 years. And anyone and everyone should check out More Perfect Union. It's great stuff. Thank you. Faiz like jazz. Shakir, thanks for the time.
I appreciate it. Nice to see you.
All right, buddy.
Thank you.